Originally released in 2010, Castlevania Lords of Shadow is the franchise reboot for the Castlevania series that, at the time when it came out, all I ever heard was just the most negative stuff, specifically from people on YouTube. I remember people saying that's a Shadow Colossus Rip Off, God of War Rip Off, or this is why Kojima shouldn't be near any sort of Castlevania title. There's a lot of stuff that people negative about, and even when I bought this game, people were like, oh, you should not have bought Lords of Shadow, but I want to check it out for a bunch of Castlevania games, and because it's a reboot, I want to see what kind of new ideas they bring here, especially since it's made by Mercury Steam, who would also later make Metroid Dread. I think Metroid Dread is great. From what I've read, the how this game came to be is going to be all over the place. I've read some stuff that said, oh, it's going to originally be like a remake, a reboot of Castlevania 1, something Belmont, or oh, Dave Cox thought that it needed to be darker because of the more freaking boyish depictions of the freaking monsters, the Castlevania franchise, those are the words I read, boyish depictions, did it be darker, or stuff like that, or how, oh, Kojima gave freedom to the dev team to very much do a lot of stuff, and how he didn't want to do QTEs, which sounds like a lie, I'll get to that point later, but just a lot of stuff that seems to be conflicted, like how some points have really been pitched as a Castlevania game, but Konami went, no, pitch as a Castlevania game, but it don't, choose a new IP, hide the fact Castlevania game for the public, just call it Lords of Shadows, those Castlevania yet, and just all over the place. Like, this seems to be like a crazy amount of just stuff of how this game even came to be to begin with. Now for the game itself, the premise is that Gabriel Belmont is on a quest for the Brotherhood of Light to go take down the Lords of Shadows in order to not only end the darkness that's covering the lands, but to also bring back his dead wife that he failed to save. So that is Gabriel's quest, and I'm gonna say something right now, there are a lot of points in this game where like every chapter, you're basically told stuff about what's going through Gabriel's mind, but they don't do a good job of actually having Gabriel portray it himself. Like, the game will say what Gabriel's going through, but don't necessarily show it, and I wish they could have done a better job. I know because Gabriel's alone for like most of the game, so he doesn't really have people really talk to and have back and forth with, but it could have done better at highlighting what's going through Gabriel's mind, or just having a narrator for every level tell you what's going through Gabriel's mind. Now, as for the gameplay, I'm gonna get this out of the way right now. It is very important to bring up. The first few levels of this game do the most awful job at conveying how this game will actually be. Like, the first few levels are handled like as if they were made more for like trailer promotional footage to get people interested in the spectacle rather than actually the gameplay. Like, the fact that the first level will linger on camera dramatic shots of these enemies that are the most basic fodder. I'm like, why are we spending so much time highlighting these moogs should be finding out the game? Or the fact that there is a second level in the game where you're riding a horse, and this is the only time in the entire game where that ever happens. It makes it weird how we put this here, make it seem like it was going to be a bigger thing in this game, but then basically don't do anything with it whatsoever. But hey, it looks cool in trailers, I guess. Or the Titan boss fights that play nothing like anything else in the entire game, clearly just spectacle, and don't add anything and are just the most annoying thing in the entire game. And that just first few levels just do a bad job of highlighting what this game's strong suits actually are. But once you're past those levels, it is smooth sailing from there. So main combat is using Gabriel's combat whip, and I do get the whip feels and combat actually flows. I just wish that some of the upgrades you got for it were more meaningful. Like, I don't know, like, you get upgrades to help with combat, but it feels like when it comes to boss fights, those upgrades don't really matter much because the auto inputs for them can take a while to actually use, and the boss is like fast enemies, so it doesn't feel like we have time to really use those auto notes. It should be more for the regular fodder enemies than boss fights. And they do get some weapons, but despite having an entire tree dedicated to some weapons in your menu for upgrades, you can only upgrade the daggers and nothing else. I just feel that some weapons could have had more going on for them. Like, there are some weapons that have better effect on certain enemies. I just feel like some of the sub-weapons just don't really get much of anything. I just find myself not using sub-weapons a lot for most of the game, especially since they're more on their own item count. So sometimes it's like, oh, I only have like 4 of these, so a few of these, like I don't want to waste these. So I end up coming that issue, even though you do get a lot of enemies when you kill them. You also have QTEs in this game that are weird, because rather than just telling you what button to push, you can push any of the 4 face buttons, but instead it's just like, oh, get it with this circle, is in this circle. It just feels weird how it's just, oh, just push any of the buttons, especially I also read earlier how apparently the devs want to avoid QTEs, which is why I said it's a blatant lie, because this game is chock full of QTEs, like mostly for combat. It just feels weird, like, well, what if you QTEs? Well, that was clearly a lie, because why there's so many QTEs in this game? Like, what happened? You also have exploration and puzzles in this game, and something I really like about the puzzles is that you have the option to have the answer to the puzzle told to you, at the cost of the fact that you won't get experience reward for doing the puzzle. So that's actually cool. We don't like doing the puzzles, want to get a move on, you just have the game basically tell you, okay, here's what you gotta do, which is a super cool thing to add, making puzzles optional, and people's puzzles come into action. You still have to do the puzzle, but now you just know what to do, right? And you need to go outside and look it up or something at the cost of you losing bonus XP. So that is a super cool way of handling it, although there are some puzzles that feel like the solution or stuff no one would rationally think. It just feels weird how some puzzles try to, like, there's one puzzle in particular try to incorporate using a sub-weapon, but the way they use it is something you have never done in the entire game, and so to think that, oh, I should use it in this particular way is a bit much a giant, who the hell would think that kind of thing? You also have exploration, or you get extra goodies, or upgrades for your health, or upgrades for your magic meters that you'll get later throughout the game. There's cool stuff like that, although there are some exploration bits where I feel like the passageway forward is unintentionally very obscure. Like, there's some times where it's just like, it's a simple passageway right in front of you, but sometimes the camera angle won't be good enough to highlight it, so I've seen people look online, people just don't know how to progress at some levels, and it turns out, oh, if I just went right on this pathway, even though there's no pathway in front of me because the camera angle's not showing it, that's how I progress. It feels like sometimes, like, unintentionally pathways can be hidden like that. There are also occasionally things where things are blocked, you need to get, like, a mount, and I wish these mounts were actually done more with, because mounts are basically, oh, fight this big monster, use the mount, have it open like a door or something, then immediately kill the mount because it's officially a lot of usefulness. I feel like mounts should have had more used on them, like an entire level dedicated to using a horse, but we don't do that for any of the other mounts. It just feels weird how the mount systems, I have an entire menu, so many different mounts they put in this game, but they have mount to open this door for me, okay thanks, next snap. It's like, I think they could have got more out of that mechanic. One thing I'm surprised by is the fact that it's actually level-based instead of one big adventure. I mean, it does make it easier to go back at the stuff you didn't get, or do extra challenges on top of the level, which is also super cool. I still not expected like some one big long adventure, but the way they do it here is pretty cool, although it's weird that you don't get your health back in between levels. I mean, you have ways in the levels to get health back, but it is weird. It also is weird how they also still have points of, oh, you can't get past here yet without a certain upgrade, and some of those upgrades can be way long after the game is like very far in, so it feels weird how sometimes like it's not consistent with the whole entire, oh, come back here and you have another upgrade kind of thing. So that feels a bit weird, like to try and be like add more reasons to go back to previous levels for extra goodies, but that just aspect just feels weird. I could have done better, but everything else about the level select system, pretty cool idea, pretty well done. Something I kept mentioning is the fact that you get magic in this game. You have light magic and shadow magic, where shadow magic does more damage, light magic allows you to get health back while fighting enemies, and that is super cool. The fact that you have the little fountains, which occasionally pop up, but when you get your health back while fighting, you have to fight enemies, and I like that. It's treating more aggressive playstyle. Get in there and start beating on enemies with light magic in order to get your health back. Be more aggressive, which is also cool because this game not only has a block and a dodge, but also a parry system. I wish the parry system didn't freaking have the games come to a screeching halt for like 2 seconds in order to highlight how dramatic it is, but it is super cool how it basically rewards aggression. It wants you to get in there, don't try to be super defensive, get an enemy's face, and in boss fights, it can go super well with the parry system, and you can just freaking start annihilating bosses if you're good enough, and that is just feels super fun to feel. That is super cool way to handle it, although I wish this game also didn't have camera shake at all, and you can't turn it off in the can't use because reasons. I mean, why? I hate the camera shake. I hate the camera shake. Get rid of it. I think I wish the game did more is that early on they had like, oh, here these little goblins that have like little explosives, but if you kill them a certain way, they'll drop the explosive, then you're able to throw it at other enemies. I thought that is a super cool thing to have, but I wish more regular enemies had stuff like that with them. But sadly, no. Generally, only one of those goblins. Like, it was an issue out early on. I mentioned on the first few levels do a poor presentation of the game, but also early on, you can feel like the game's not really changing much because of the fact that it feels so similar, but there are other locales, there are other stuff, there are plenty of enemy types in this game. It just feels like the first bit of this game feels like it can feel like nothing's really changing. Man, I feel like that could have been done quicker because you do spend long segments in locations, like very long time in these different settings and location enemies. So it can't feel like it can be going on for a bit too long if they don't start changing things up with the enemies you face in them, since you are mostly doing combat. There's also platforming and climbing, and the climbing in this game, I didn't think I'd find that enjoyable, but it actually is, especially with the fact that they also occasionally use the combat whip in order for you to use it as like a grappling hook, which is super cool and fun to do. Although the regular platforming, when I try to have you actually just jump things, yeah, that could be a lot better. I mean, at least the jumping ain't like classic Castlevania just stumble to stiff, but like jumping and trying to get your platforming still not the game's strong suit. We're still not there. Despite a reboot, platforming still ain't great here. But when it comes to the whole entire climbing around, using the combat whip and everything, that is super cool along with the combat. Another gripe I have is with the game's final boss, because it could have had a lot more to it. It feels way too basic considering everything you face throughout the entire game. Like, I feel like a lot more could have been done with it, but it just feels like it's just over so quick and it doesn't have much to it. So the final boss definitely could have used a lot more improving. Then we have the DLCs, which must have a good sign because the game's producer, Dave Cox, claims that the DLCs were a mistake. And the DLCs were made to essentially try and better explain the game's epilogue, because it kind of feels like a head-scratcher, but it's like the head-scratcherness of it was the point. So I can see why the producer thought trying to explain that is a mistake. But the DLCs, for the most part, are pretty good. The puzzles in it are pretty good head-scratchers. The combat challenges, pretty fun. The only real fault I have with the DLCs is the final opponent of the DLC, because that final boss fight sucks. It's just fighting the same thing over and over and over, but each time it just gets faster and harder to hit, and there's no real change in the boss moveset itself. It just gets faster. It's just not a fun thing to fight. It's just super frustrating. And you can tell this is part of the DLC section because the budget for the cutscenes starts turning into storyboards. It just turns to stylized storyboards. So yeah, but yeah, I see why the producer thought making the DLC was a mistake, and it feels like it basically is trying to explain something that was supposed to be a head scratcher, supposed to be left confused. So trying to explain it feels like defeating the point of it. Overall, I just ended up really liking Castlevania Lords of Shadow, despite how much I see people just bash this game completely. Like, it's a fun game, the combat is good, though the things that the first few levels do a terrible representation of highlighting the game's strong suit. The Titan boss fights suck. The final boss of DLC sucks. The final boss could have been better, but just like everything else, is fun. The combat is fun. The boss fights are really fun. I wish that Gabriel got to express more of his inner conflict rather than having a narrator just tell you what Gabriel's feeling and going through. But overall, it's just a fun game. It's just great. I feel like it has potential to basically do more with what it had, and just like Mercury did a good job, especially for a reboot, trying to change things up for the franchise, which is pretty cool. Granted, the idea that they need to change things up because Konami felt like Castlevania, basically as before, wasn't really doing what capturing people. I don't know about that. Except with the Domus Collection, I thought those games were pretty great, except for Order of Ecclesia. But seemed like freaking Lords of Shadow didn't work, and they got 2 more sequels. So the Mercury Stream did do a good job, and hey, because of that, they ended up doing freaking Metroid as well, so that's super cool. But yeah, Lords of Shadow, just a super dope game that, surprised at the reputation it does. Like, even to this day, I've seen people be like, why did you buy Lords of Shadow 1 and 2? I wanted to play Castlevania. I just want to play Castlevania. This is a Castlevania game. Like, I don't get it. I don't get the hate for this game.